Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Very Reasonable Pilots podcast. I'm your host, Charles. Along with me, as always, my co-host, editor, producer, co-pilot, gunner, navigator, orator, and podcasting associate, Jacob Gloth. How you doing today, Jacob?
I am swell, Charles, and I'm very excited because you told me before we got into this, you said that this is the best pitch you've ever had, the greatest idea to ever grace the Very Reasonable Pilots podcast. I don't, I'm excited.
I don't know. I think I might be insane, right? So what's the definition of insanity? Doing the same thing over and over again, expecting different results. And every single time I tell you about a pitch before we get on, as soon as we get on, you start talking shit about the pitch in a very specific way.
I didn't talk shit. I just told you how good it was.
No, I know, but you know what you were doing because I told you I wasn't the most confident in this pitch. But we're going to do it anyway because, I have another pitch that I was writing yesterday, kind of like at the same time as this one, that I want to put some more time towards because it is taking the idea I had last week, which was piggybacking off of your idea. Do you remember?
I do. The sending revolutionaries out to planets to make the revolution for them.
Exactly, right? Mm-hmm. I'm taking that idea, and then I'm adding in a character that we have in our back catalog, that we've had multiple shows about.
Oh, I see. Is it Jesus from Punk Rock Vampires?
It's not Jesus. It's not our Lord and Savior. It's not Isaac Illich, and it's not Jimmy King.
Was there not a Jesus character, like named Jesus in Punk Rock Vampires, or something like that?
If memory serves, the characters in Punk Rock Vampires are named after biblical angels. None of them are named Jesus, but it's like Gabriel and Ezekiel.
Oh,
and
yeah,
shit
it was the fucking Ninja Turtles. That's what it was.
Exactly. Sure. So,
this guy's going on about angels. Just call them Ninja Turtles, man.
They're just the Ninja Turtles. Michelangelo, Ezekiel, fucking Ninja Turtles, guys who did the
Raphael.
Sistine Chapel. Raphael. Yeah, I'm taking a character that we've utilized before, and I'm adding them into that plot because I thought they slotted in rather nicely. So, we'll leave that for a little
Jimmy
sizzle. It's not Jimmy King. It's not Jimmy King, and it's not Isaac Illich. Ivan Illich, whatever the fuck.
It's not Isaac Illich. Isaac.
That's right. You have
Isaac
to think
Asimov and Ivan Illich.
Yeah.
I know.
Yeah. We know. This is the only two Russians.
No one really cares about the pitch you're doing, like 2 weeks now?
No one gives
What
a
is the
shit.
pitch you're doing
Avant En
today?
Garde. That's the pitch.
That's the title of that other show that I don't remember.
Ting, ting, ting. Yeah. Imagine, like, in the title sequence, it's like, Avant En Garde, and these big, like, bold, sort of bubble letters come in, and they've kind of got, like, a lot of space on them, and then we see the flash of a saber as it cuts them across, and then the, like, outer bubbly, visage falls down, and then you get this cool, like, Times New Roman, style, Avant En Garde, exclamation point, exclamation point, exclamation point. That's the opener. Avant En Garde follows Herbet Graves, a Spanish-looking, American-named, Australian-sounding swordsman who's come to the Isle of Madmen and Monsters to become the greatest fighter in the world. With him, he has brought a stalwart companion named Theodore the Undying Feline, and together they will travel across this isle, defeating warriors and battling monsters in this strange, surreal nightmare land. So that's the idea, right? We have our characters, Herbert and Theo, and they travel across the Isle of Madmen and Monsters. That's the whole name. It is such an unruly and strange place that has not even been given an official name by the rest of the world. And they defeat monsters and other swordsmen in order to complete Herbert's quest to be the greatest fighter to ever walk the earth. Yeah. So that's our episode. That's our show idea. That's where we're starting at, right? Mm-hmm. And so Herbet Graves is a quiet, reserved man who has spent his whole life training, not allowing anyone to come close to him. This makes him a naive but kind man who is often overly nice. He's very nice, and sometimes his niceties get him into trouble, right?
Just like you.
Yeah, like me. I'm just too nice. I was trying to read this word. Often to his own detriment. That was the word that I wrote in my notes. He helps people often to his own detriment, but I couldn't read the word because I wrote it in chicken scratch cursive.
Very nice.
And Theodore, the undying feline, is a 200-year-old pirate cat who has adopted Herbert and acts as his part-time Jiminy Cricket and part-time partner in crime. Say that 10 times fast. So you know how pirates they'd keep a cat on the ship to catch all the rats and rodents that would make their way onto the ship at port, right?
Yeah.
He's one of those. But he was like a ghost pirate. He was a cat on a ghost pirate ship. And so he's this like undead, undying cat who just like wanders around, and he kind of stumbled into Herbet Graves and like started talking to him and realized that this kid is stupid as anything and he doesn't know anything at all, but he has this like goal, right? His desire, his great, purpose in life is to become the greatest swordsman who ever lived, right? In order to fulfill this prophecy that was told to him as a very young man by like a witch, right? And so those are our two main characters, Herbert and Theo.
Is this cat on a scale of Puss in Boots to the freaky cat in Alice in Wonderland, where would you put this?
I would say the cat can talk, right? But it walks on 4 legs, right? So it's not running around, doesn't have shoes or anything like that. I would say it's probably closer to the Cheshire cat from Alice in Wonderland than Puss in Boots, because Puss in Boots is kind of his own dude, right? Puss in Boots, he's running around, he's got a cape, he's got a sword, he drinks at bars, he fucks cat ladies, right? He's cool. This cat, he is more of a pet, but he's kind of, imagine the crow from, or the raven from Edgar Allan Poe's The Raven, right? This sort of like this portent of things to come, this sort of like creature that exists in a magical sense as well as in a real sense. And so you
just like Odin's ravens, kind of.
Exactly. But Theo is his own person. He talks, he thinks, he plans, he he has his own like ideas and plans and goals. But he kind of has adopted Herbert. Herbert has not adopted this cat. This cat has adopted him. And Herbert, because he's lived on like, just imagine he lives on like a tiny Scottish island, separated from everyone and everything else, right? And all he has ever done is train with his family, right? That's all he does with swords, who we never meet, by the way. Because this show, because it's titled Avant En Garde, is going to be weird and surreal, if you couldn't figure that out. So kind of...
What?
Think David Lynchian, sort of. Like Twin Peaks style, right? The Herbert and Theo just arrive. There's not really any background information. We never meet Herbert's family. We never find out about the curse that Theo's under, right? This is about the journey rather than the actual destination, right? And there is a thematic, psychological, philosophical through line of this show, right? That I'm going to break down for you right now. So, what's better? Is it better to have no faith or to have faith in something that is stupid and dangerous, right? Who has it better, basically? The Joker from The Dark Knight, or like a terrorist, like Osama bin Laden? That's the idea.
Okay. Those are not the examples I would have gone with, but okay.
But that's the difference between you and me, baby. I always go, if I can get Osama in a sentence, I'm gonna put him there.
Okay.
But like apathy or delusion, is basically the idea. And so Herbert is representative of the delusional faith in this prophecy that we never fully hear. Maybe we see flashes of it as a child. He would like go up and we see this horrible witch, you know, hermit creature lady, and she like tells him all about this horrific prophecy about this warrior who will become the greatest fighter who ever lived after going and, you know, defeating every warrior on the Isle of Madmen and Monsters, right? And Theodore is kind of acts more as a kind of like, this is all dumb. He's the apathetic sense. He's the apathetic person in the duo. And so our whole show, the whole thrust of each episode is going to be Herbert and Theo doing battle with someone who is representative of some kind of apathy or some kind of delusion, right? And so I have a whole big list of creatures and warriors for our duo to fight together. Okay. And the creatures not as much aren't really as representative of other stuff because they are it's flora, right? Or fauna, not flora. Flora's plants. I mean, some of them are plants, but it's fine. Okay. So we have the Cream Knight, the Ruby Rogue, the Gorilla, the Ember Light, Blade Lust, the Wizard of Weird, and the King. These are our warriors that whatchamacallit, that Herbert will fight against throughout the show.
What's the King's name?
The King is
Jimmy by any chance?
That's his. No, I wish. No, that's his name. Is the King. We'll get to that. As to why his name is the King.
Because he's Elvis.
Because he's Elvis. Maybe we could have him be Elvis. That would be funny. And then the monsters, I have a knife snake, the clappers, the ear squirrel, the shield bearers, and the kill goose. The kill goose is just a goose with a knife. The shield bearers are, imagine like armadillos, but it's like the size of like a Labrador, and instead of it being like whatever armadillos' shields are made out of, it's made out of like shields, you know? The clapper, imagine birds, but the birds are made out of hands, and so when they fly it sounds like clapping, and so you know the birds are coming when you hear the clapping. And the knife snake is a giant snake made out of a knife. And ear squirrels are squirrels with giant ears, giant human ears that cover their entire bodies. Like they have multiple ears covering their entire bodies. So yeah, that's our fauna for the series, and maybe some flora too. We could have some flora in there. I don't have any flora ideas, but you know, if you come up with any, let me know. So I have Herbert and Theo arrive on the Isle after a long and mysterious ship journey. They arrive at port in the town of Portship, where they are told that the Isle is home to the greatest fighters and beasts the world has ever known. And Herbert reaffirms his desire to fight his way across the Isle to fulfill a prophecy he heard as a child, right? So that's kind of the first 10 minutes, is our two characters arrive, Herbert gives off the boat, and he's like, smell that air, and then Theo gets off the boat, and he's like, ugh, it smells like fish and death and poor people, I hate this, right? That's basically their dynamic. Theo points out all the bad stuff, and Herbert points out the good stuff. Like you and I, you know?
Yeah.
When we're hanging out. I go, God, isn't it lovely that we're alive and the sun is shining? And you're like, God, this sucks. I've been
down
shot.
The shades and I put a hat on, sunglasses. The sun,
he only goes out at night.
We're both
he does not eat garlic.
Vampires.
It's weird. But we love him anyway. Either way, right? And so Herbert and Theo, they're running around the Isle. They're loving it. They're having a great time. That is to say, they're having an okay time. Theo's having a bad time. Herbert's having a good time. So it balances out to just an okay time. And this island, I really want it to kind of think the Seventh Seal, right? And Seventh Samurai. Lots of sevens going on.
Oh.
Like, kind of...
Seven, the movie with Brad Pitt.
Yeah, that's in the movie is Brad Pitt. We'll have Kevin Spacey there, and he'll play the Cream Knight, who I will get to, because the Cream Knight
we're bringing Kevin Spacey back?
No, no. No. I refuse. Even though he lives near you.
Does he?
Mm-hmm.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, Kevin Spacey lives in the Inner Harbor of Baltimore City.
Okay.
Fun facts for everyone. If you want to go find Kevin Spacey, you know where to start looking. And, yeah, I kind of wanted to give this sort of, like, gray, black and white. I think the show should be in black and white. At least parts of it should be. Maybe it can be kind of a hyper color situation where things are colored but everything is standard black and white, you know? But yeah, I kind of want the show to have a sort of melancholy look to it, a little bit of a haze that you get with old movies, you know? Black and white, very dramatic vistas. We're on the ocean, and it's obviously meant to be sort of reminiscent of medieval England, but with other cultural influences, right? I think that there could be, like, paddy fields, there could be a lot of Japanese and Chinese influences on the architecture, the people all, it's like every ethnicity, every race is accounted for here, and there's not really a homogenous, it's not like there's more of this group than any other group. It's kind of, this is an island that exists outside of space and time and reality, and sort of just floats across the oceans, you know? Not actually. It's not like the island's actually a moving thing. I mean, it is, because, again, this is a very surreal show, so say things will happen that won't make any sense if you follow solely spatial logic, but, you know, that's whatever. Who cares? This isn't a show about spatial logic. It's a show about cool sword fights. No.
Oh, shit. I'll have to scrap my whole description.
Scrap your episode, yes.
Yeah.
This is a show that's about a few things. It's about weird imagery. It's about ideas that aren't well explained, or not well explained, aren't, like, in-depthly explained, and it's about cool fucking sword fights. Because that's the other thing I really want to do in the show, is cool sword fights with a variety of different creatures and warriors who all use their own methods of fighting, right? So think Zorro, think the first 3 Pirates of the Caribbean movies, right? That sort of thing.
Star Wars,
Conan the Barbarian, right? I watched Rebel Moon Part 2, Child of Fire, The Scargiver last night. Don't think that, because that was terrible. It's a terrible fucking movie. I can't think about Rebel Moon Part 2, Scargiver, The Scargiver right now, because it's so fucking stupid and bad.
But you don't like his version of Star Wars?
I don't like his version of Star Wars, because if they took all the slow-mo out of that movie, I genuinely think it would be an hour and 15 minutes. It's 2 hours. It's a 2-hour-long film. And slow-mo, oh my god, they're two separate... I'm sorry. Just one last thing, and then I'll move on from Rebel 2 Part 2, The Scargiver. There are 2 separate grain-based slow-motion montages in this fucking movie.
Like grain as in...
Grain, as in
product?
Yes. 2 separate grain-based montages, slow motion montages in this movie. Each of them lasts like 5 minutes long. It did my fucking head in. Oh my god.
That's a lot.
Sorry. I'll move on now. The Cream Knight, right? And this is going to be kind of a basic idea of how each of the episodes is going to go, right? Our 2 main characters are wandering across the land, right? They're going through swamps, and they're going on roads, and they're going across bridges, and over mountains and crevasses and all this stuff, right? And they stumble upon a town or a building or somewhere where people are, right? Or maybe they come on a bridge that has a guard, right? Something like that. And they talk to the people, they figure out who they have to sword fight. Theo explains that it's a stupid idea and that the person that they're fighting is dumb for this reason. Then Herbert counters with an argument that maybe they're not dumb for this reason. And then they have a conversation with this person, then they fight them, they succeed, they move on, right? That's each episode, right? Not each episode, but that's kind of the basic format of how it'll be structured. So the Cream Knight is a magical homunculus that protects a dairy farm. He is an incredible fighter, but he has a weakness that our main characters will find out in the middle of the fight. So the Cream Knight, imagine, have you ever played Dark Souls or any of the Dark Souls games? You know the Onion Knight, right?
Sir Davos from Game of Thrones.
No, where's my phone? I forget his name, but he's a knight in the Dark Souls he wears this big clunky white armor. Onion Knight. Yeah, now I gotta figure out. Sigmire. You know,
just tell us what he looks like, because no one's gonna have any idea what you're talking about.
Yeah, he kind of looks like the Michelin Man, but his head's a white onion, right? He's got this big, bulky white armor on that's very rounded. Sigmire, Dark Souls, if you really want to know what he looks like. Now, I imagine that the Cream Knight is similar in his, sort of build, right? He's kind of a bulky dude. He's got a cream white armor, of course, and he's got kind of that like tall helmet that lancers would wear, that the guys who would jousters would wear, as to keep wood splinters out of their eyes, right? So he's got a tall helmet, he's got big cream white, perfect armor, he's got a big flowery feather, also, of course, cream white, an enormous, like claymore, enormous sword, everything is this sterling bright white that you cannot, it is amazing how white this is, because he's walking in mud, and yet his shoes seem not to pick up any of the dirt, right? And he doesn't talk, and they ask him a bunch of questions, they ask him all these things, and eventually, after, a few minutes of silence, the Cream Knight looks over at them, and out of the, holes where his mouth would be, this white cream just starts bubbling and pouring out of the holes in his mask and dribbling down his armor and getting everywhere. And Theodore and Herbert are both kind of like, oh, that's kind of gross. And they go over to the farmer who runs the farm, and he explains that this silent protector is the Cream Knight. He is a homunculus born from the scum that forms at the bottom of all of the cream-making barrels, right? So they'll have these huge barrels in the back of the dairy farm where they make all the cream. And eventually, after years and years of cream production, the bottom of the barrel had this thick layer of scum on it that eventually was able to pull itself away from the barrel and climb out and clamber into this armor. This perfectly normal armor that was totally whatever, and then they got inside of it and it turned into this beautiful sterling white armor, and they've protected this dairy farm ever since, fending off creatures and warriors alike. Bandits and raiders know not to come here because the Cream Knight defends all, And Herbert, obviously, hearing this, he gets excited because he wants to know what's going on with this Cream Knight. He wants to fight this guy because this guy's probably got all sorts of crazy skills, and if Herbert defeats him, he'll prove that he's a better fighter than the Cream Knight. And so they get into this fight, and Herbert is, imagine Zorro, right? He's got kind of a Zorro thing going. He's got all black. He doesn't have a mask, but he's got a cool hat. When I said he was Spanish looking, this is what I said. This is what I meant, right? He's got a cool hat with the feather in it. He's got the little mustache, tweedly little beard. He's got a fencing sword, right? and he's got an Australian accent because I wanted to make him absolutely unplaceable as to where he's from. And so we have him fighting the Cream Knight, and Theo is like, at first, he's like, this is stupid. And then Theo, like, he kind of gets a little bit more into it. And then, like, he's just like, woo, Herbert, yeah. Like, he's his cheerleader because Herbert and the Cream Knight have been fighting for hours on end. Until eventually Herbert, like, he's exhausted because he's been sword fighting this thing for hours, and he eventually runs down and he starts, like, drinking water from the stream just to get some of his strength back. And they see the Cream Knight for the first time. He falters. He begins to, like, look as if he's been injured. He puts his sword on the ground and he, like, holds himself up. And then as soon as Herbert stops drinking the water, the Cream Knight picks it back up, throws the sword over his shoulder, and, like, begins to attack again. And then they realize that the weakness of the Cream Knight is seeing anyone or anything drink something that is not milk or cream.
What?
The only weakness that this thing has is watching the consumption of non-dairy products, because he is himself a dairy product. And so Theo...
Okay, so what you need to do right before that is have Theo drink milk. Mm-hmm. And the Cream Knight just absolutely kicks his ass.
Yeah, you're
as
right.
Soon as he takes a sip of
Maybe
it.
the farmer offers him a glass of milk to get his strength up, because many come to challenge the Cream Knight, but no one has ever succeeded.
Damn.
Yeah. Jake. He's here.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so Theo hops off of the boulder from which he was watching this glorious battle take place, and he just begins to gently sip up the water, like slurp it up, as a cat does, and stare at the Cream Knight. And the Cream Knight eventually, like, after sword fighting Herbert for another few minutes and staring at Theo as Theo drinks more and more water, the Cream Knight eventually falters, and Herbert is able to drive his saber straight through the Cream Knight's armor plating, and cream just pours out of every orifice that this armor have. From in between every single, like, crack and crevice and all the holes in the armor, just cream pouring and pouring out until eventually the armor clatters to the floor, turning back into its dirty old, like, state, and the Cream Knight is no more. And the farmer comes out and he starts crying and screaming. Now he has to, defend his farm himself, and nobody will help him. And Theo and Herbert, having successfully defeated the Cream Knight, decide that they will display his body for all to see. And they put the armor up onto a scarecrow, and they wander off again as the farmer picks up the sword and throws it over his shoulder, preparing himself to fight against the raiders and the creatures of the night that will attempt to destroy his way of life.
What the fuck? How come these guys are bad?
They're not nice. They're not good people.
Not good.
Theo's
just
a bit of a
farmer's
dick,
life.
And Herbert is too stupid to know that he's a dick, right? Because Herbert's just so focused on his goal that he refuses to, think about the consequences of his actions, right? And Theo is so apathetic that he doesn't care about the consequences of Herbert's actions, right? He doesn't give a shit about this farmer, right? Also, I have been debating. I'm wondering if, and I want to know your opinion, should Theo be a skeleton cat? Not fully skeleton, but like his face, like maybe half of his face is skeleton and the rest is regular ass cat.
Like the flesh is peeled back a little bit?
Yeah, exactly. You can see like the eye socket, or lack thereof, an eyeball.
I like that.
Yeah. I think that's fun. Yeah, and then we have the next episode, which is the attack of the clappers. So a swarm of clappers have been attacking this local village, and I realize I've been talking so long, so I'm gonna kind of run through it. A swarm of clappers have been attacking this local village, and Theo and Herbert have decided that in order to improve Herbert's skills, they will help this village to defend off the clappers. And night after night, Herbert, is out there just slaughtering dozens of these like bird creatures as they refuse to stop attacking this town. Like the long hall of the town, like longhouse, think vaguely Scandinavian-esque, right? There's like a party going on, basically. It's like a gathering of everyone that they do every night, the banquet, the nightly banquet. And Herbert defends it, and then during the day is fed and clothed and entertained, let's just say, by the locals. And he does this for a few nights in a row until he eventually realizes that the thing that's bringing all of these clappers is this very specific instrument that the townsfolk use in their nightly banquet. And if they simply stopped using that instrument, the clappers would leave them alone because it like affects them greatly. Think like kind of Grendel in Beowulf, sort of. But these townfolk are just so oblivious and so ignorant. They refuse to even consider the idea of changing the instrument. And after night of Herbert fighting off these clappers and day after day of him trying to convince these people that maybe it's a good idea to stop doing that, he decides that this has gone on long enough, you know, and he just like takes a very small piece of the instrument. Like if you go up to a clarinet, you take the reed and you can't really play the clarinet, or any like wind instrument for that matter. So he takes just one very small piece of the instrument, puts it in his pocket, and he and Theo wander off as the townsfolk try to play the instrument, fail, but then notice the clappers aren't coming, and the townsfolk decide that it was actually the two strangers that were bringing the clappers, you know? And now that these two horrible strangers who didn't respect their culture at all or their being have gone, they can now continue their existence unabated and unaffected by the creatures of the night. And so they pull out a different instrument. And of course, they start playing this new instrument, and a different horrible creature from the depths of this island slithers out of the fucking woods and begins attacking them, because that's just...
And maybe as we're like leaving this shot, right, we also see another group of people coming into town.
Mm-hmm. Perfect. I love it. We love to see another group of adventurers wandering into town. And the next guy I have is the king. That's the next warrior on the chopping block. And the king's whole thing is, the thing king, is that he's not the king. He's just some guy. He is a fucking lunatic who has deluded himself into believing that he is the king. And so his whole thing is that he's covered with diamonds and jewels and all this royal finery, and he just wanders this island fighting anyone who says he's not the king. Now, there is no king on this island. There is no form of, like, overarching government. It's simply just, like, each town is in charge of itself, right? There's not really a formal government on this town. And so it's not like the actual king is going to get pissed off at him. So he's decided he's the king. And eventually, he'll kill everyone on the island and be the king. But before he does that, he runs into Herbert, who obviously just kind of is like, no, you're not. I've been all over this island. There's no mention of a king. No one pays you taxes. You're not a king. And he gets into an argument with the king. And the king is like, I am the king. Do you know my name? It's the king. Of course I'm the king. And it's sort of like this bickering situation. They bicker for a little while until eventually Theo says something, kind of outrageous. It's just like, you can take your jewels and go fuck yourself, right? Something, not like that. It'd be better written than that. But, something like that. And that's when the king decides to fight Herbert and Theo. And again, this whole show is an excuse for very weird characters to get into very long, weird sword fights. So the king, each one of his diamonds that he wears, he pulls off, and it's a little sword, right? It's a little blade, and he's got like all these hidden blades and things on his person. That's what he's using to fight, and he's a great fighter until eventually Herbert is able to, fell him, and he takes, some very expensive, beautiful piece of jewelry, and he steals it from him. He says, "This is my tax on you, king, you may be the king, but I'm the lord," right? And that sort of thing. And the king, accepts his place as being less than Herbert, a lesser warrior, and therefore a lesser king.
Oh my god. What if he starts, since he doesn't kill him, right?
Yeah, no.
Is that Rion? You should start calling him Emperor.
Oh, that would be great. That's fantastic. I hadn't even thought about that. Yes, Emperor. Of course, Emperor. And then the king, he's been thoroughly beaten and humbled, and he says, "Thank you for your kindness, Emperor. Your wisdom knows no bounds. I will spread the word of your great generosity around the island." And Herbert's kind of happy with himself. He's been told he's great and generous and wise and the emperor and all this shit. And he's got this very nice, gold necklace, and it's pretty good, and he hands it to Theo. And Theo, of course, being a 200-year-old pirate cat, can immediately tell this is not real gold. It's all fake. This guy's bullshitting. He doesn't even have the actual, things that a king would have. It's fake. It's bullshit. And then Herbert just kind of okay. And he tosses the diamond necklace over his shoulder, and he just keeps walking. And then a clapper probably sweeps by, steals the diamond necklace, takes it to his nest, and puts it into an enormous pile of gold that this one bird has, because that's how television shows end. Yeah. Because I've been going for nearly 45 minutes, I'm gonna break down the Ruby Rogue is a sort of imagine the main character from The Princess Bride, right? He's a sort of a pirate rogue scoundrel guy, and his whole thing is that he's dedicated to money. He's dedicated towards the pursuit of wealth, because each of these characters is representative of a different thing to dedicate yourself to. The Cream Knight dedicated himself to a business. The king dedicated himself to power. The Ruby Rogue dedicates himself to gold and jewels and money. And so Herbert is, of course, captured by the Ruby Rogue and his whole crew, and it goes on a fun pirate adventure across the island as Theo is kind of nostalgic over being on a pirate ship again. But eventually he learns better and frees Herbert, and they eventually, fight off the island and defeat the Ruby Rogue and are crowned the pirate king of the island. And then Herbert says, "How many pirates on the island?" And it's just it's just us. We're the only pirates. And I'm "Oh, so am I the captain of the ship now?" And he's "No, get the fuck off my ship. You may be the king, but I'm the fucking captain. Beat it, douche." I have the Gorilla. So this is a man who is cloaked in this enormous black armor, right? That is vaguely in the shape of a gorilla. And he does not use blades. He only uses his hands, and he rips people apart and just tears them limb from limb and beats people to death with his fists. And his whole thing is that he's dedicated towards war, towards blood, towards violence,
Wrath.
Wrath, if anything. I guess you could make these the 7 deadly sins if you really wanted to, but Herbert has to fight him. And Herbert, of course, he's fighting him, and he's doing all right, but he's not winning. And eventually, he figures out that the only way to defeat the Gorilla is to, give him a something that he can't get from violence, which is friendship. And so Herbert befriends the Gorilla, but almost predictably, it doesn't work out, and the Gorilla nearly rips his head off. But Theo has a better idea, and he goes and he finds a baby gorilla, and he gives it to the Gorilla, and the Gorilla is so touched that he lets Theo and Herbert live. And Herbert is just kind of happy that he didn't get murdered, and he guesses he defeated the Gorilla. I guess. Sure, we'll count it as a win. And I'll write it down in his notebook, like, defeated the gorilla with Theo's help, I guess. And yeah, I mean, the show doesn't really have an end point, which is kind of the point, you know? Like, our main characters there's no main goal that they're actually ever going to reach, because Theo's not interested in a goal and Herbert's goal is so broad and ridiculous that he'll never reach it. So that kind of allows the show to not really end, but also end whenever it wants. You know? Okay. Because Herbert can go, I've defeated every great warrior on this island. I'm going to get on a boat and go to a different island, right? We'll go to the island of Sticks and Stones or whatever, and he'll fight. There'll be a whole new cast of warriors and creatures for him to defeat in combat.
It's like Pokemon.
It's like Pokemon.
He just keeps going forever and ever.
He just has to keep going. Yeah. But that's
them all.
That's the show idea. Gotta kill them all with a sword.
Gotta kill them all.
Stab, stab, stab.
Gotta
do you have any ideas?
All.
Any episode ideas or warrior ideas?
I had one about a samurai character, but I was trying to come up with a thing for him. You know, like maybe like why. I was trying to think of what his flaw would be, because you stole a couple of my ideas while as I was coming up with it. Well, obviously you can't with words; it's not really stealing. But I was thinking of the Rose Ronin. That was the name I came up with.
Oh, nice.
But
I like that.
I don't have a flaw. What's a flaw we could use for this one?
Well, if all of our characters if all the quote-unquote bad guys are kind of like representative of dedicating yourself to something, often to your own
the pursuit
detriment.
Of glory or either honor. Or honor, one of the two.
I think...
So glory, just endlessly trying to... It kind of maybe it's like a reflection of our main character, where it's like...
I like that.
He's looking for... You know, one's victory all the time. It's the only thing he can get. When he loses to our main character, it's like he's devastated.
Mm-hmm. He kills himself, maybe. Tosses himself off of rocks, or...
Well, I guess he could. Or maybe it's like... It's, if you wanted to be maybe slightly more wholesome, but also reflected the main character a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
When he loses and he no longer has this pursuit of glory, he actually becomes happy.
Oh, yeah.
Like, he can just live his life now. He like goes back to his family, but the main character's like, and I've got to go back, keep going on. You know, I've got to. You know, he doesn't
always
see
keep
the lesson
moving forward. He doesn't learn the lesson at all, of course. Yeah, I like that. We have to come up with a different name besides the Rose Ronin, I think, because we already did the Ruby Rogue.
I just like the word Ronin.
I like Ronin too.
Can you something samurai? The sly samurai. The slippery samurai.
The slippery See, I like the slippery samurai.
I said Scarlet Samurai.
Oh, yeah.
Slippery Samurai.
I like the slippery samurai because we could also make him slippery. Like, that's his thing. Is that he's covered in oil. He's covered in
that's how he's so hard to kill, because no one can grab him.
Exactly. He's covered in a thick, gross mucus that our main characters have to figure out is...
Yeah, whenever the main
flammable.
character tries to hit him with the blade, it just slides right off.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, and that's what they discover, that it's flammable, and he just lights it on
fire. Yeah, and they throw him on fire. And he tosses all of his armor into the ocean and realizes his pursuit of glory has netted him absolutely nothing, except for more scars than he could count, and years away from his family. So, he decides against it. Yeah, that's the show idea I had. Avant En Garde. Fun, little, weird, surreal show about sword fighting and body horror and gross, weird stuff and philosophy. So, I'm casting myself as... I'm gonna cast myself as the farmer. In the Cream Knight episode.
The farmer gets pissed off. Yeah. The farmer should come back as a character that tries to kill.
Yes, that's great. He comes back in season 2.
Mm-hmm.
Or just later on. Who are you casting yourself as?
I I'd like to be the Slippery Samurai's brother.
Yeah, the Slippery...
who shows up and is like, you need to give this up. You've got a wife and kids. I've been helping take care of them for years. And, you just aren't... You gotta stop this glory thing.
Well, I think that would kind of reinforce the sadness that this series is kind of mired in. If the Slippery Samurai learns his lesson and, like, comes to terms with the kind of person that he is and how much he's lost and given up. And then he goes back to his family hoping for a reunion, but it's actually you banging his wife and raising his son. And he's just, like, left completely drained because everything he had is taken away. He doesn't even have his fucking sword anymore because he threw it in the water after some dick and his cat set it on fire.
Well, I thought the lesson in this was that is more reflecting on the main character who could give this up and could go back to his family and have this life that the Slippery Samurai now has that he's given up.
Yeah, it just depends on how sad you want to make it.
Either works.
Either works. Yeah. You're his brother. I'm the farmer who gets murdered.
Or comes back. Well, you should come back as like a undead farmer.
Oh, horrible ghost man or like a necromancer. That could be fun.
Yeah.
Yeah, that would be a fun thing to do. All right, everyone. Thank you for listening to the Very Reasonable Pilots podcast. I've been your host, Charles. Along with me, as always, been my co-host, editor, producer, co-pilot, gunner, navigator, orator, and podcasting associate, Jacob Gloth. If you like what you heard here and you want to hear more, please give us a like, a follow, subscribe, tell your friends, tell your family, tell your dog, tell your cat. And remember, we'll be right back here next week with a brand new televisual series for you to imagine and enjoy. Thank you all, and have a good night.